Hi folks, welcome back to Gardening in Nakusp with Ray. This is the first episode of the second season. I just thought I'd spend a few minutes just talking about what our goals are with this YouTube. Mainly we want to disseminate information on gardening. We want to focus on food gardening because that's so important to all of us. And we also will talk about how to use this food that we grow to make a good meal. So we'll talk a little bit about recipes and ways to use what we've grown to make culinary interesting meals. We'll also talk about ornamental plants as well too, because the ornamental plants are food for bees, for other insects, and they're also food for our soul. You know the saying of stop and smell the roses. So that'll be our goal, is to talk about gardening, talk about cooking, and talk about flowers. Thank you. So while we're in front of this gorgeous Forsythia bouquet here, we'll talk a little bit about that. So there's a technical term called forcing, which is not really forcing at all, but you just, when I'm outside pruning, and especially if I'm pruning some Forsythia, then I'll bring them inside, and just in the warmth and the water, they'll just bloom on their own. It's just wonderful. And so that only works for spring blooming bulb for plants. So like something like a hydrangea wouldn't bloom because it hasn't got the bud set. So any plant like the cherries and plums and Forsythia. I've never tried lilacs, but lilacs might be a one to use. So one that have the buds already set on in the spring. You just bring them inside and then you can have early blooms. And just as a point of information too, they say when the Forsythia buds have become a little bit yellow, that's the time to prune the roses. So that gives you a foot mark to when to prune your roses. Thanks. So when I'm thinking of spring flowers too, pussy willows come to mind. And the pussy willow is Salix, which is the genus name, and Discolor, which is the species name. And you can see here we have two different types. There's the little miniature ones, which are very tiny, tiny little ones, and the larger ones. And in the back of my mind, I'd remembered that the pussy willow is one of the first pollen sources for the wild bees and bees. And so when I looked up on the computer just to make sure, it said yes, that's true. So they produce a lot of pollen, and the pollen is good quality. It has protein, which the insects use to feed their larvae. So I encourage anybody who has acreage to plant pussy willows and let them grow big and huge, and then let them, so you can see if you look close, Joe, there's the pollen on there. Oh, wow. So as they mature, they become covered with pollen, and that's what the bees love. And I didn't know this, but apparently on the pussy willows, the plants either have male flowers or female flowers. And generally they say in the nurseries they usually sell the male plants because the male flowers are a little bit more showy than the female flowers. And before I forget, I'd like to introduce Joe Law, who's our videographer and a very good friend of mine.
Hello! We're matching today.
Oh yeah. And so for people that don't know Joe, Joe is famous for several things. One, her vegan food truck, which is incredible food and worthwhile to go and visit. And she's also done, pre-COVID, she's also done the non-alcoholic dances. And also she organized the Black Lives Matter rally that we had maybe a year ago.
1.5 years now.
Oh, a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Joe.
Anytime.
So when I think of growing food, I began thinking, what's the easiest for people to do if they're just starting out? And I thought berries, they're great. Blueberries, blackberries, raspberries in particular, because they're tall and they're kind of like vertical growing. So in a small space, you get a lot of production. And so what I do is I make canned pears, applesauce, plums, and cherries. I'm lucky I have my own plum tree, and Teresa shares her pears with me. And applesauce, well, when things are really producing and food is relatively cheap, it's nice to buy quantity apples or quantity cherries and do some canning so that you've got it in the season when food is more expensive. So it's very easy. Usually I just take two jars. This one is cherries and pears. And then I threw in raspberries and blackberries and blueberries, and it just makes a delicious treat. And the berries you can also throw in muffins. They're great for muffins, or in cobblers. You can mix, and then I have rhubarb also in the freezer. So you mix rhubarb and raspberries, and I can mix some dried cranberries with it too. It's really good, and then you make a great crisp. So Yeah, so for easy food production, go for berries. They're perennial, they come back every year. You can mulch them so you don't have to do a lot of weeding. And so it's easy. Well, I mean, it's still work, but it's the easiest things to grow.
And delicious.
And delicious. Yeah. So now we're in the grow room where all the action's happening because this is February the 27th. We had fresh snow outside today, so all the action's inside here for the gardeners. So we're just going to go down to the basics and explain what you'll need and talk about seeding and pricking out, which is taking the little seedlings and putting them in 4-inch pots. So we'll start out with this. So what I do is I have these flats, and then I like to have a web tray with it because these flats are not that strong. And if you put them in a web tray, then that makes them stronger, than you don't go breaking them because they're kind of expensive and sometimes hard to find. And now what's really handy is to have these as well too. So when you've got it seeded, you put the plastic cover on top, and then that keeps all the moisture in. Because seeds need heat and moisture to germinate. And luckily these lights produce a lot of heat, so that gives us our heat. And with this cover on top, it keeps the moisture in. So this is our Sunshine number 4 mix, which is basically peat moss and vermiculite and perlite. And I use that for seeding is because it's sterile medium, and the peat moss has something in it too that helps prevent damping off. So damping off is probably the worst thing for your seedlings. So what happens if they damp off, the seeds rot, or else as they come up, the stem is rotted, so the plants die. So that's why I use this medium, and the seeds have all the food for the plants in them, so we don't have to have a good soil. So we use this medium for the seeding. And what I do though is if they're going to be in the flat for a while, I do give them a little bit of seaweed fertilizer for nutrients.
What do you have growing in here?
This was actually on this side I had the peppers, the jalapeno peppers. They were up and growing and ready to prick out when my red peppers, the bell peppers, hadn't even come up yet. So it's interesting how this variety of peppers grew and produced well, or grew big and was ready to pricking out, whereas these ones didn't. Then these ones came along, and now I've pricked those out. I've left one just to show how we do the pricking out. And then I found some Bulgarian carrot peppers, and they're a cross, or they're a little bit between the jalapeno peppers and a cayenne pepper. They're medium in heat. And I thought my jalapenos weren't that hot last year, so I wanted something a little bit hotter. So I found these peppers, and so it's great. There's tons of different peppers all available, and the problem is having space to grow all these different varieties of stuff.
Right.
That's why if you have some friends that are also good gardeners, then maybe you can share plants. So somebody can grow the jalapenos, and somebody can grow the bell peppers, and somebody can grow the Bulgarian carrot peppers, and then you can share them, so you're not having to grow everything yourself.
Yeah, is that like a seed sharing? Or I guess like a plant swapping.
Share. Yeah, plant swapping, yeah. So it's nice if you can organize your friends that way, then especially when we all have limited space for growing stuff. So yeah, so we take the flat, we pack it full of mix. Now some people take the soil and put it in a container and then wet it down. I find it's just easier just for me to put it in the flat, and then I take hot water and I put generally about 6 cups of hot water to make it all nice and wet, and then I pack it down again and put any more in that's necessary. And then depending on the seeds, ideally like to have each seed individually planted. So I take my finger and I make holes, and then I put the seed in them. Let's see if we can find something that's done individually here. Oh, like these here.
What are these?
These are gazanias.
Pretty.
Yeah, they're gorgeous flowers. But sometimes if the seeds are really small, then I just broadcast them. That's like these.
What's broadcasting?
So that just means I just take the package and just kind of, as best I can, thinly spread them out and then put a little bit of soil on top and pack it down. So these were quite thick, and I've been pulling out little ones in between. And now the bigger ones, I'm starting to prick those out. Just means taking them out with my widger, which is this little tool, and just digging them up with roots intact, and then putting them into 4-inch pots. So generally, I take stuff from the flats, and they go right into 4-inch pots. And I pretty well do everything. There's not much I don't do that, except for root crops, like beets and carrots. Those I don't plant and then dig up, because they don't like it that much. They're finicky, and they're better just to be planted right out in the garden. But for lettuces and spinach and peppers and beans, corn is the only thing I do in these little 4-packs, 6-packs. Because I don't want to have them in 4-inch pots long enough to. What you want to do is you want to have the root filled out here, so when you take it, it doesn't fall apart. So with these small pots, the corn plant will fill this out quite easily. And then when it's ready to go out into the garden, you just lift them out of there and then put them right into the garden.
And you have even smaller ones than this for corn too.
I do have smaller ones, yeah. So yeah, so that's the process. So it's planted all in flats in a sterile medium mix. And then when it's ready to get transplanted, it goes into 4-inch pots. Now when it goes into 4-inch pots, they're going to be in there for a while. So I'll want to make a better mix than just the potting mix.
What makes it better?
So what I do is with this container here, I take 3 scoops of the sunshine and 1 scoop of the manure and a little bit of the Gaia green fertilizer. So I do 3 scoops, 1 scoop, mix it all up together. And then because this is big enough, I can do another batch. So I do another 3 scoops, 1 scoop fertilizer, mix that all together.
Oh, and that makes you a perfect mix for...
That's
and
right.
this is easier to carry around, right?
That's right, yeah.
And
it's still light, but it's got extra nutrients in there. And still once a week, I give everything a feeding of seaweed fertilizer. And I like the seaweed because it doesn't smell so much. The fish fertilizer is quite stinky. But I like to keep everything organic because it's stuff that we're growing, so I like to have it organic fertilizer as well too. So I find the seaweed is quite nice. So you can get it in these large containers, or else you can get it in packages. And you can also get it in smaller containers too as well, in liter jugs. I just use quite a bit, and so it's just cheaper for me to buy a large quantity.
Buy in bulk.
Buy in bulk, yeah. I think that covers pretty well everything for the planting. And now we'll talk about pricking out. Now, because I have cold frames out there, I have the lettuce and spinach planted early because I have somewhere for them to go. Whereas if I didn't have those cold frames, it'd be much too early to plant this stuff because it wouldn't be ready. The garden would be too cold for it to go out in the garden. But luckily my cold frames are out there, so as soon as it gets big enough, they'll go into the cold frame.
How warm does it stay in your cold frame?
Well, it's sometimes I guess at night it's just above freezing, depending on how cold it's outside. But what I do is, if it's a kind of a sunny day, I take the covers off of them, the glass covers off. But if it's cold, then I leave them on. Mm-hmm. And sometimes if I'm away working, it's a little bit tricky, and so sometimes you err on the careful where you take the frame off. And I've taken the frame off and then come home, and then there's all snow inside the cold frame. But luckily, it's still not cold enough for the plants to freeze. And one time I left the cover on because it was snowing when I left, and they were baked when I got home. So, but they recovered after that too. So it's a little tricky, but and then at night times, if it's cold, then I put blankets over top, and then that keeps it warm in there too. So as well. So now we'll bring our container over. Now some stuff is really easy to transplant. So this is my pepper flat. So over here I had the jalapenos peppers planted, and they came up, and I got them all pricked out, and they're in 4-inch pots already. And so they were up and growing, and the bell peppers hadn't even started yet. So eventually they came up and grew, and I got them in 4-inch pots. I left one just to show how, for pricking out purposes. And then where the jalapenos were, I seeded the Bulgarian carrot peppers in there. So
Always using space.
Yes, these guys are really easy. So they come up with a nice root like that. And so then I'll just make a hole in the center here. Drop it in. Have it nice and upright. And here you want some stem. Some stuff like the spinach and lettuce I have right close to the ground, to the soil. But here you want to have a bit of a stem. And then I just pack it in nicely like that. And then even if I'm doing it flat, I water each one as it go individually so they don't dry out. So I plant the plant, give it some water, and then at the end, when I have the whole flat done, then I give it some seaweed fertilizer just because it's nice to give some extra nutrients. So it's as simple as that. Now some stuff, we'll try some spinach, is not so easy to do. And I try to douse the plant with water, just go circle around it like that. And for the different types of peppers, like I did my bell peppers in black pots, I did my jalapenos in white pots, just so later on they won't get confused if in the greenhouse things get moved around. I know all the black pots are bell peppers.
Color coordinated, planting.
Yes. I've got stuff mixed up before, so I've learned to...
Same.
Yeah. So, now I forgot to mention, I went to Home Hardware in Nakusp, and they have these trays and the covers. They didn't have the web trays, they're hard to get. And the web trays actually come in two different sizes too. There's this size, which the flats don't fit in, and then there's this size, which the flats do fit in. So sometimes you can get these from grow centers where they bring stuff in and they don't particularly care whether they keep them or not. So sometimes you can pick up some of these, but they're really handy to have. So Home Hardware has some. I heard that Silver Building Supplies has some. And I was in Nelson the other day, and I went to Ellison's, and they have these trays, the covers, and they also have the 4-inch pots, which is really nice. Okay, so we'll stop and we'll go on to the spinach.
These guys have a little ventilation.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah, we'll just shut that up.
Yeah. Not today.
Yeah. So this is my spinach flat, and I made a little bit of a mistake. I had some seeds left over from last year, so I didn't want to waste them. So I mixed the 2021 seeds with the 2022 seeds, and I thought, well, that'll be okay. But as it was, I had not very good, not total germination, and I usually do 60 to 80 plants of spinach, and I only had about 40 some. So I reseeded this flat on Wednesday. And already you can see there's little ones coming up here. Now these ones are left over from the first seeding, and they're a little bit leggy now. But I wanted to show how to plant them, because they're a little bit trickier. So I'm just trying to disturb the seeds in the pot there. Okay, so there we go. Now, we want to have the basil leaves right close to the soil. So what I do is I put them like that. Just take these glasses up. So I had them on its side. And then I'll upright them, start packing them down. Basically, you want to have the plant kind of in the center of the pot.
And well supported with a little hill.
That's right, yeah.
Nice.
And rather than having this stem at the soil level, you want to bring the soil up to the bottom of the leaves there.
Mm-hmm.
Always give them little taps and it works well.
Mm-hmm. Whole job well done.
Yeah. So I've buried the new little leaf. These are the just the first leaves, not the true leaves, but I buried the true leaf, but it'll pop through. I'll just give it a shot of water. I just kind of try to water around the plant. And we'll do one more, just so...
Do you ever use a spray bottle?
Once in a while I do. If I feel like the roots are not very big, then I also spray the plant too, just to keep it humidified.
Little pepper and spinach. And how many pints of spinach do you yield from?
Gee, I never kept track. But it's enough to make a lot of spanakoppitas and use it for special omelets or stir fries.
Lasagnas.
Yeah, lasagnas, yes.
Future lasagnas.
And actually, the other day I went out. Usually I harvest my Brussels sprouts and have them in the freezer, but this fall I thought, I'll give them a little bit of a chilling period. And then I just never got around to harvesting them. So we had a really cold spell early, and then it got mild, so I harvested them all during the mild time, and then it got cold again, so I thought, maybe they'll be ruined. So but the other day I went out, and because I had a new recipe I wanted to try, and they looked a little rough, but when I trimmed them up, and they were just great. They were still in good shape, so they're really tough. Brussels sprouts are great.
We had some Brussels sprouts too, just the other day from our last season patch.
Oh wow! Left outside.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
So there, it's all set to go now, and you can see there's a true little leaf just barely down in there. So yeah, so some stuff very easy to prick out, which just means planting it in the 4-inch pots, and some stuff's a little bit trickier, but after a while, I'm not too bad at it, but some people are very skilled at this, and some people, they're all fingers, but after a while you get used to it. So I think we'll go out to the other room where I have other stuff growing. We'll take a look at what we have out there. So before we go to the other room, we'll just take a quick look at what we've got growing here. So this is celery. Again, it was really, really tiny seeds, so I just broadcast it, and they're just starting to come up now. You see little tiny babies there. And so it'll be a while before I transplant them out into 4-inch pots.
This is when you want to get started early.
That's right, yes, yeah. And I also have a cold frame for them too, so you can go out quite early too as well. This year I'm going to try, I don't think I kept mine wet enough, so I'm thinking about getting a 5-gallon bucket, drilling some holes in, sticking the bucket in the cold frame and planting the celery around it, so that I just fill up the bucket with water and it slowly leaks out and keeps them wetter. I found when they were in the beginning they were really good, but towards the end there they got kind of woody, or they weren't quite so good.
Clever move.
Yeah, so I'm going to try that, I think. So when you plant two things, like I had artichokes, the globe artichoke in here too, and when I plant stuff I look up the germination time, so whether it's 14 days or a week, so I try to have stuff that's similar germination. Now these artichokes came up and they were huge plants because the seed's so big. So they're out and they're in the other room now. But so yeah, so if you have stuff together, then try to have the same germination date so that you can leave the cover on as long as possible. This one here, so this is the Gaillardias.
These ones?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then here I had Zinnias, I believe. Yes, giant Zinnias. So they outgrew the Gaillardias. They're up and grew and they were big, ready to be transplanted. So they're all moved out of here. I just left the sticks in case some late ones came up, so I would know. I have the red ones and the wine ones, so I knew which was which color. But it looks like I got them all now. And then down here, these are the zinnias that have been transplanted already.
Wow.
So these are wonderful plants, nice and stocky and healthy.
Yeah, these do look super healthy.
Yeah. So they're a little bit fussy. They don't like to be too wet. So it's hard to get them in commercial greenhouses just because oftentimes people who are caretaking the garden, the plants there, they maybe give them a bit too much water, so they become waterlogged and the stems get kind of rotten. And so I keep them on a little bit on the lean side. And they're wonderful. They make great cut flowers. They make good flowers for the garden. And so that one's, I think, the wine ones. And then these are the red the red ones, except for this one here. So again, I put the red ones in, what color pot is that, black or green? Green. And then the wine ones are in the pink pots there.
Okay, now we know. When did you plant these guys?
I planted those on the 13th, February the 13th, Sunday. That day I planted the lettuce, the spinach, onions, leeks, peppers, the Rudbeckia, gazanias, and zinnias.
So you've got your,
I had been using
Darker's
the
diary.
journal, but I've been using it since 2016, and it's getting kind of confusing in there with all the different entries.
Oh,
So I thought this year I'm going to just start over again and just do on a calendar.
nice.
That way I can just easily look back on last year. And,
On dates.
Yeah, on
Yeah.
dates, yeah.
Nice.
Because it's nice to know when you planted stuff, when you picked it out, when you put it outside.
Yep, we're keeping a little diary ourselves.
Exactly. It's so helpful for the next year. So these are some special Rudbeckia named Indian Summer, and they were quite expensive seeds, so I planted those individually. And then this was a package that probably some naturalist organization gave me, just a free pack of the seeds. And there were so many seeds in there, I just broadcast them in there. And like I said, I thinned them out a little bit, and now I'm starting to pick out the biggest ones. And I'm not sure how many flats I'm going to do those because I have a little bit limited space, but we'll see how that goes.
Rudbeckias are the black-eyed Susans.
Black-eyed Susans, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So this is Rudbeckia fulgida, which I like. It's an old-fashioned variety, and it's tough and always is reliable and always comes up. So nowadays they have some fancier varieties too, but sometimes they're not quite as hardy as the old-fashioned ones. And this, I think, is onions. Yeah, these are the shallots. Now, it's handy to have a book that talks about planting seeds, because some stuff likes light to germinate and some stuff doesn't like light. So they say onions don't like light. Now, I wanted to have them underneath the lights because I wanted the heat. So what I did is I planted them, and then I put a piece of newspaper over top, this newspaper here, just to keep the light out, and then I put the cover on top just to keep the moisture in. So it was with mixed success, but now you can see that there's still, so eventually I had to take the paper off because these were all coming up. And I've given them a trim, these taller ones, I've given them all a trim.
Oh, you trimmed the
Yeah,
onions.
yeah, because they get kind of fall over and get leggy. If you trim them, that makes them thicker, and it's really much better for them. But you can see, if you look down closely, that it's still coming up new ones here.
Oh, yeah. There's a little coming
Yeah.
up there.
So, first time I grew onions, I freaked out a little bit because, they weren't coming up. But now I've learned that I just wait patiently, and eventually I get a good tray full.
Now, don't your onions from the seasons prior come up? Or
No, these, I guess you could leave them outside because they don't produce, if you want to get your own seeds, they don't produce seeds till the second year. So I'm not sure whether you could leave them outside. I've never left mine outside, I always bring them in.
okay.
But yeah, so I harvest them and bring them in. And the Egyptian walking onions and chives, they all come up.
They'll come up.
Yeah, but that's a different thing. That's not the globe onion.
Right. Sorry.
So that's the shallots. And shallots from seed is actually a recent innovation. Previous to that, you had to get starts. And then, okay, so over here. And the nice thing about these racks is not only are they economical for space because they got 3 racks, but they are on wheels too, so I can tuck them back in the corner there and then bring them out.
They rock and they roll.
Yes. So these ones are, I have, these are the white or the yellow onions. And you can see I gave them all a trim, the big ones coming up here. And again, they're still coming up, new little plants here and there. So I'm hoping eventually I'll get a good flatful. So because there's still some coming up, I've left a tray on here, the cover on here, just to keep things moist so it aids the germination of the new ones. I don't want it to dry out and have them get too dry. And the older ones don't seem to mind it. These are red onions.
Yes, you can tell the difference.
Yeah. If you look closely, you can see, if you can look close to the bottom there, you can see a little bit of purple down there. But you can see the tiny little guys there. And this was a new variety. I get my seeds from William Dam, and this was a new variety that I thought I'd try. And it's supposed to produce more white. Basically, it's the white part, the stalk, that you want to use for cooking, and not much of the greens. And I try and dig a trench and put them in there, and then fill up the trench as they grow, just to get as much white as possible. Because
like mound it?
Like mound it, yep.
Okay.
Yep. But last year too, I actually made a pesto out of the greens, and actually was quite good. So,
oh yum.
I mean, there's way too much greens to use to make a lot of
right,
pesto.
yeah.
But you know, if you can give some away to friends. But anyway, yeah. I mean, nowadays they make pesto out of all kinds of stuff. So, so leek pesto was just great.
Yum.
I won't quite put as much leaf in as I did. It was pretty strong because I was trying to get as much leaf as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's production up till now. So this year I'm growing flowers as well as vegetables for the garden. So I needed more space. So I used to have my lemon trees here, but they got such bad bugs a couple of years ago. And Teresa this summer, she kept up with it really well and got the bugs under control. But as soon as I brought them in, they were just swarmed with bugs again. So I thought, well, I had enough of that. I unfortunately turfed them. So the lights used to hang quite high, but now I brought them down low and put this table here. So it's just on a chain, and when I want to change the level of the lights, when the plants get a little bit bigger, I just hook the chain a little bit higher on here. So now I gave myself a whole other you know, 2 lights for propagation here. And eventually, if I need more space, I'll take these plants away, get a tray in so we're getting this height here, and then put more plants here too as well. So these are the lettuce that, these were the ones that are left after I picked out the ones in the other room there. And I thought I'd just give these to Jo if she wanted them for her greenhouse.
Yes, please.
Yeah, either that, or you can leave them in here and let them get big, and then just even clip them too, just for some greens for your salads.
Microgreens.
Microgreens, yep.
Heck yeah.
And so this is the spinach from the other room there that are pricked out into 4-inch pots. Some I just, like these ones I just pricked out just today, and some of these were probably the other day, but you can see the older ones are now developing their true leaves.
I like this guy.
And then these are pepper plants. And so these are my bell pepper plants. And these are going to go into coal frames as well too, so I don't mind them being a little bit bigger. So the bigger they are, the nicer they take the transplant into outside. And again, I got these guys in white pots, and I've got my jalapenos in, not sure, in different colored pots anyway. And for now, I just got them right underneath the lights, but when I run out of space, I'll be putting them the other way. And I'll just kind of watch. I think if I put them a little bit higher, the lights are good enough that they all can get a nice dose of light. Now, speaking of lights, you want to use grow lights. You don't want to use ordinary fluorescent lights. So there's different brand names, but you want to have a full spectrum light that's as close to natural sunlight as possible, so your plants grow nice and stocky and don't get too leggy. And these are just some of the Rudbeckia from the other room that I just pricked out a couple hours ago. So I'm just again taking the bigger ones and putting them in pots.
Gorgeous. Oh, they look happy.
Yeah. And over here, these are more spinach, part of the crop for the coal frame. And you see some of them are really growing well. They're getting good true leaves. As I mentioned before, once a week I give them some fertilizer, a little bit of seaweed fertilizer, and I do it on Sundays, so I kind of organize every Sunday I do that. Now I had to squeeze this in here, so in order to get in this cupboard, I had to leave the door open. So it's so these are my jalapeno peppers.
Nice.
And I'll probably have too many here. I'll give some away, but there was, I guess, that many seeds in the package, so I thought, well, let's just use them up. And then it's always nice to give friends plants.
Totally.
And then these are the artichokes, the globe artichokes.
Oh, they're huge.
Yeah, so last year, I think Deb
Yeah.
gave me an artichoke plant, and it produced well. So I used to grow them in hills quite successfully, so I thought, oh, I'm going to grow them here too. Now, usually in hills, I used to mound them up with leaves to get them to winter through, and I forgot to do that for mine, so I'm curious in the spring whether it'll come back. But anyway, I wanted to get a few more growing out there too as well. The spot out there is really rooty. It's got a lot of tree roots around it. So I'm going out into perennial crops rather than annual crops. So they get through, put lots of manure in, plant the plants, and then hopefully that gets established before too much roots get back in there. So timing when you start your plants is very important. So on February the 13th, I started all my leeks and onions. And even if I didn't have a cold frame, I would probably start them on that time anyway, because they take a long time to get big and mature. So I start them then, and then just keep them cut off into the flat and keep feeding the flat. Some people have mentioned about pricking the leeks out and putting them into individual pots, but I find that's a bit too much work and more time than I can devote to that. So I just keep them in the flat, and it seemed to work okay. Like last year, my leeks were wonderful. They were really great. Now, because I have the cold frames, I don't mind starting my spinach and lettuce early, because they can go out into the cold frame. And the flowers I started early too, because they can, once they get too big in here, they can go out into the greenhouse. And the last other stuff is just when I just made a few little notes when stuff was starting to appear, and made notes when I pricked stuff out. But for the next batch of stuff will be on March the 13th is when I'm going to start my tomatoes and eggplants. And I don't mind starting them a little bit early either. If they're quite big in the 4-inch pots and they're not ready to go out into the ground, I just put them in the gallon pots. Because the tomatoes are good that way. You can plant them deep and then they root all along the stem. So then you just have big tomato plants in gallons that go out into the garden, and they're big already. And same with the eggplants too. I usually save about 3 eggplants and put them in the 5-gallon pot.
Yeah, in your Mediterranean garden.
Yeah, in my Mediterranean garden, yeah. So they don't mind starting them early. But I'm going to wait a little bit on the brassicas. I found last couple of years, I put them out in the garden, the weather looked great, and then we had this little cold spell, and so it was hard on some of them, especially the cauliflower suffered last year. The other stuff was not so bad, but the cauliflower, I had to start all over again.
Oh.
So I'm going to start them on the 20th. I'll watch the weather and just see. And then this year I've saved some juice containers myself. I've got some friends to save. So it's the big plastic juice container. I cut the bottom off. I'll take the lid off. And then when I plant them out, I'll put this little greenhouse over top of the plants. So I'm figuring that'll give me an extra warmth in order to, if there's a little bit of frost, it won't bother the little plants. So we'll try that. And
the cloches.
The cloches, yes, my plastic cloches.
Yeah, nice.
So that's for the next schedule of stuff. So that's the tomatoes and all the brassicas. And then after that, we'll probably start like the basil plants. I'm going to start parsley very quickly, very soon, because that takes a while to come up. And so yeah, I find it's really nice this way, just to have my plants growing in the 4-inch pots. Like, say, usually start the cauliflowers quite early, and so they're ready to harvest quite early in the season because they like it cooler weather anyway. So if I pull a cauliflower out, it's nice to have a plant like a fennel plant or a bean plant, something already growing in a 4-inch pot. So they just take the cauliflower out, pop another plant in. Otherwise, if I'm putting a seed there, I kind of forget, did I put a seed there? It's hard to look after, but if you got a plant there, something's there, it's easy to look after.
No time lost.
No time lost, yeah. So that's what I like about this system of starting them inside, having them, good growth in the 4-inch pot, and just plunk them out in the garden.
Nice.
So it's a little bit of work, but it's very rewarding and delicious.
Well, I started seeding. We started seeding 3 days ago, and we already have some things popping up.
I know, it's amazing. It's just amazing how fast some stuff grows.
So cool.
Yeah. So I'll just leave you, I read this little quote from Martin Luther King, and it really struck me. I really liked it. And so it's, if you can't do great things, do small things in a great way. And I thought that's just a wonderful saying. So I'll leave you with that. Thanks.